What if the very laws that are supposed to protect you were being rewritten behind closed doors to do the exact opposite? Today, we're going to dig into 18 urgent warnings raised against Indonesia's proposed new criminal procedure code, also known as the RKUHAP. And believe me, this document raises some huge questions about justice, your rights, and the future of law in the country. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But it's not a hypothetical. This is one of the biggest concerns raised by critics in the document we're breaking down. So what's behind this pretty scary warning? Let's get into it. All right, so right off the bat, the source we're looking at says the whole problem starts with the process itself. The argument is that the very foundation of this new code is shaky because of how it was put together. So this document claims that a bill that's going to completely redefine criminal justice was basically shoved through on a super rush timeline. Critics are saying there hasn't even been a public version of the draft available since July of 2025. And yeah, while some public input was heard, the feeling is that it wasn't really taken seriously. The bottom line here, according to the source, is that this whole process just flies in the face of transparency and public participation. The basics of a democracy. Okay, so that's the process. But what about the actual content? Well, the source document gets into several ways it believes this proposed law could hit home for regular people, directly impacting the rights and safety of ordinary citizens. So what's wild about this is the huge shift it represents. Right now, under the current law, you can only be arrested after it's been established that a crime actually happened. But this new law, it would allow police to arrest and detain you during the initial investigation, before anyone even knows for sure if a crime was committed at all. That is a massive change. And we see that same pattern again when it comes to things that really invade our privacy, like police searching your home or wiretapping your phone. The source points out that the new code would strip away a key protection. Instead of needing a judge's warrant, an officer could just decide it's an urgent case and go ahead on their own authority. And critics are warning that, without a judge in the loop, that's just a recipe for abuse of power. This also applies to undercover operations. The source highlights that a tool that was once reserved for really specific serious stuff like narcotics cases could now be used for any type of crime. And again, with no judge overseeing it. The big fear here, as laid out in the document, is that this could lead to entrapment, where police could basically invent a crime just to pin it on someone. This quote from the source document really just sums it all up, doesn't it? The big fear is that by giving law enforcement all these new powers and taking away the checks and balances from judges, the new code just swings the door wide open for random, arbitrary actions and abuse of power. Now, the new code also brings in something called restorative justice, or RJ. And look, on the surface, this is a good thing. It's an approach that focuses on healing and reconciliation instead of just punishment. And this is a big but, the way it's being implemented here, according to the source, is a huge problem. Here's the concern. The new law would let these restorative justice deals happen during the investigation. Again, before a crime is even confirmed, and without any real judicial oversight. The source warns this essentially creates a dark room, a situation where people could be pressured or even extorted into a settlement with no one there to make sure it's fair. So all these changes, earlier arrests, warrantless searches, unsupervised deals, they don't just exist on their own. The source argues that when you put them all together, they paint a much bigger picture, the creation of what it calls a police superpower. So how does this happen? Well, the source points to something called expanded discretion. All that really means is giving law enforcement a lot more freedom to make their own judgment calls without having to follow a strict set of rules or get a judge's okay first. And this is where it all leads, according to the source, the police becoming basically one single superpower agency. The reason? This new code would put all other special investigators, we're talking anti-corruption, environmental crime, you name it, all under the coordination of the national police. So you can see why critics are worried. They see this as a dangerous concentration of power in one place. They argue it guts the whole idea of checks and balances and completely fails to deal with existing problems around police misconduct. For them, instead of moving forward with police reform, this new code would be a giant step backward. But it's not just about the expansion of power. The source document also warns about something else, that the RKUHAP could bake injustice and discrimination right into the legal system itself. For example, the source points to what it calls a two-tiered system for arrests, and you can see it pretty clearly here. A regular citizen, you can be arrested based on an officer's discretion. But a judge? To arrest a judge, the police would need a special permit from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Critics say this creates one set of rules for the powerful and a totally different set for everyone else. And it doesn't stop there. Take a look at this, another pretty stark example of what the source calls discrimination. It has to do with people with disabilities. This proposed code would allow their maximum detention time to be extended by an extra 60 days. It's a provision critics are calling blatantly discriminatory. And finally, on this point of justice, the source argues the new code fails to deliver on a huge promise of reform, ending military impunity. By keeping a separate court system for soldiers who commit crimes, critics say the new code guarantees they won't face the same justice in civilian courts as everybody else. Okay, so the final, and maybe one of the biggest, warnings from this document isn't even about one specific rule. It's about the very real potential for chaos if this whole thing is rushed into law without being properly thought through. Just take a look at this timeline. The source points out the law is supposed to kick in on January 2nd, 2026. But get this, there are more than 15 essential supporting regulations that still need to be written in just 1 year. Critics are saying this is a totally impossible deadline, and it's basically a recipe for disaster. And this, the source predicts, is what that disaster looks like. The law will just suddenly be active, but all the crucial rules that tell people how to actually follow it won't even exist yet. This could create total confusion for both citizens and the police, leading to legal chaos across the board. So when you add it all up, a secretive process, the erosion of basic rights, a massive concentration of police power, and the very real threat of legal chaos, the case laid out by critics is pretty clear. They present these 18 points as urgent, flashing red lights, and they leave all of us with one final heavy question to think about. What is the true cost of rushing justice reform?